I'm Deacon Frank Moreno. I was born in Lockney, Texas, raised in Lubbock, Texas, and in Slayton, Texas. Basically, Slayton's about 15 miles away from Lubbock. And I was adopted by my grandmother, so she's my mom. I consider her my mother. And I was raised with 6 aunts and an uncle, which I consider my brother and my sisters. I have 3 half-sisters on my mom's side, and then on my dad's side, I have 3 half-brothers and I have a half-sister. So it's a very mixed family that I have, but I'm very blessed. I was baptized Catholic, and I was did my first communion when I was a little boy. I remember my grandparents, I remember going to Crucistas with my grandfather before he passed away. He passed away when I was at a very young age too. And I remember going to the Crucistas. And I also remember my grandmother being a Guadalupana. So, you know, the base was there as a child. I can remember being a little boy sitting in the bancas, in the benches, in the mass, and wanting to be an altar server. I wanted to be an altar server. I couldn't wait to do my first communion so I could be an altar server. It was an exciting time for me. And I remember one time when I was sitting just in the benches in mass one time, and I saw we had a deacon, and I also saw the priest. And in my mind, I thought to myself, man, I wouldn't want to be the priest, but I wouldn't mind being the deacon. I always wanted a family. I always wanted to have a family with me, and a very mixed family. So I grew up in a different good values and some bad values, you know, just some things that made me the man that I am, the good and the bad. So I have to take the bad as well, so that way I can be the person that I am today. In 1997, I was working at a job. I was about 20 years old or so, 21, 22, I can't remember, 22, I believe. And I was working at a job, and I told myself, because I was in a lot of bad things, drugs, alcohol, gang member. I was a bouncer for some guys that were not in good things and stuff like that, and drugs and alcohol. And I got a full-time job, and I said, if I make it at this job, I'm staying in Texas. But if I don't make it in this job, I have to leave here. I just had to get out. Well, I didn't make it. A few months went by. I got into an argument with a young man. The supervisor said, we can't have your type of attitude around here. And he fired me on the spot. I waited for the other guy to come out. I never saw him come out of the building. He never came out of the building. And so I had never met my biological father. I had never met him. And so I called up to Nebraska. I knew he lived in Grand Island, Nebraska. And the type of person that I was a very mean and very hard person. I wasn't a person loving, caring. Some things in my life had happened to me where my heart got to be that rock, that stone, where I didn't let people in very much. And so I called my dad's house, information. Remember 411? I called 411, got the number for Frank Sanchez, and I called Grand Island, Nebraska, and one of my aunts answered. And I was like, is this Frank Sanchez's house? And she's like, senior or junior? And I'm like, well, I guess I must be the third. So I said, Frank Junior. And he's like, he's not here, he's at work. I was like, well, let him know that his oldest son is coming to Nebraska, and he's gonna stay there with him. I didn't ask for permission, I didn't ask. It was just the type, I figured after 22 years, he owed me something. And my dad, he called me up and he says, you have a place with me. He opened up, he didn't say nothing, or he was like, no, or nothing like that. My father's a wonderful person. He's a good man, he really is. And I thank God for, you know, because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be here, you know, and I did meet him, and he's a really, I have nothing negative to say about him, you know. We missed 22 years of our life together, but that's okay. And when I got here, well, you know, I had to ride a bus, and Greyhound buses back in the day, in the 90s, ooh, Lordy, I think still maybe today, it was a long ride. And it took me several days to get up here. And when I did finally get up here, I met him, you know, and the thing is that the type of person that I was, not anymore, I told him on the phone, when I said, when I meet you, I don't know if I'm gonna shake your hand, I'm gonna hug you, or I'm gonna knock you out. And just to let you know, I'm 6'3", 220 pounds of muscle. And so, just to let you know, I did shake his hand. And he's like I said, he's a short guy. He's like 5'7", maybe 150 pounds. So it's like, no. And when I moved here to Nebraska, just to let you know, it doesn't matter where you live, the bad elements everywhere where you go. It doesn't matter. The devil finds you wherever you leave. So sometimes you just have to change the situation. And when I was here in Nebraska, they had what I called back then in the day, it was an ethnic festival. It was in the end of July, I believe, the end of July that they had those. And after a day of drinking a lot and doing some other things I shouldn't have been doing, I went outside because we were at a bar, and I started walking around the ethnic festival. And that's when I saw this really beautiful woman walking. And at the time she'd say she was a girl. So I saw her, that's where I met the woman that would soon be my wife. I met my wife here in Nebraska. I always wondered if this would get recorded or not. So when I was, in 2006, I had back surgery and I couldn't go anywhere. So my brother-in-law and my sister-in-law would go to my house and would bring me to church. They would bring me to mass because the doctor said, the drugs that I gave you are too strong, you can't be driving. If he only knew the truth. They were really strong. And so I wouldn't leave the house. And on Sundays they would go and they'd pick up me and my daughters and we would come to the church. And here at the church, it started coming like consistently from August, September, October, and there was a retreat in November. And in that retreat, I was invited. And people from the church are like, we want to invite you to this retreat. We're going to invite you to this retreat. Man, I was like, leave me alone. No, I kept on saying no. But I thank God they were so persistent and that they kept on asking me to go because it was a blessing. They kept on telling me to go. I was like, no. And I looked at my brother-in-law and said, if you go, I'll go. And he looked at me and he was like, if you go, I'll go. And finally, here's the thing. There was a little voice inside my head that said, go. That's all I said. It was just so loving, so calm, so patient. And that one little voice just said, go. So I finally gave in. And I went to this retreat, and you can only imagine how a big old baggy pants, a big old bright yellow shirt that said players on the front of it. And in that retreat, I found out that I was loved. And in that retreat, I found out that everything that I'd done in my past, that God forgives me. And in that retreat, I remember the Blessed Sacrament coming out. I didn't know what the Blessed Sacrament was. I didn't know what the Eucharist was. I just knew it was, you go and receive it at communion. I didn't know it was the presence of Jesus. And they brought it out in this monstrous, and it was just so beautiful. And I fell to my knees. I just kneeled down and I cried, and I cried. And at this retreat, I was like, I want to follow him. In the retreat, there was a permanent deacon that he was there preaching. And when I was looking at him, I was like, man, I could do that. I could preach. And he's preaching, I'm like, man, I could be a deacon. I didn't tell nobody this, but this was what was happening in my mind. And this is what I was thinking. And at the end of the retreat, they're like, we want people to come up and give their testimony. So I'm like, well, I'm gonna go give my testimony. So I get up and I give my testimony. And I remember a voice from the back. They're like, the leader of the group was Tomas. And they yell, and they're like, Tomas, there's your next preacher. And I'm on my mind, I'm like, yes. And I don't even know what I'm saying at the moment because I didn't know what it entails. I just, the guy was talking about God and it touched my heart, it changed me. So I started serving in the church. That was in November of 2006. February 2007, I am serving. I'm a usher for Mass. I am a Eucharistic minister in Mass now. I help in anything and everything in the church, and it's a beautiful time for me. And I'm an usher at the back of the cathedral here at St. Mary's, and the priest just goes in. He just walks in. It was Father Richard at the time. And there comes Sister Isabel. She comes walking in. She teaches RCI classes just before Mass. And she comes in, and always about the same time, priest gets us to the altar and she's coming in the door. And at that very time, she's coming in, she's like, oh, Frank, it's a good thing I see you today. And I'm like, okay, why? I'm like, good, cool. And I'm like, what's going on? She's like, Frank, I had a dream about you last night. And I'm like, sister, I'm married and you're married to God. And she hits me. She's like, not like that. She goes, I had a vision. And she goes, God is calling you to the diaconate. And I'm like, okay. And so I was thinking about, that was February 2007. This is just a few months after my conversion, after I had my come to Jesus moment. And I think about it, Mass ends. After Mass, I give my wife a call. I call her up on the phone and I'm telling her this, and I'm like, the nun, she tells me that God is calling me to the diaconate. And what do you think? And within the conversation, the thing that I remember the most is my wife says, I will never be a rock to cause you to stumble for what God wants for you. Nunca seré piedra de tropiezo para lo que Dios quiere para ti en tu vida. And that was just the most beautiful thing. And the next Monday, Tuesday, I called our pastor up. I was like, can I get in the deacon program? And Father Richard at the time, he's like, well, not at the moment because we just started it and they're you can't get right now, but if you're still interested when September comes around, let me know and you can get started. Well, sure enough, August comes around, I'm giving Father a call and he's like, yeah, the deacon classes start this day, you can come. And I was excited. This new era, it hasn't even been a year since my conversion, since my year of coming to Jesus, but I just knew I wanted to serve him. I just knew I wanted to be with him. I wanted to be the person like that deacon that changed my life. I wanted to change lives. I've been blessed, definitely been blessed. I've traveled to the East Coast, West Coast. I've been more on the West Coast more than in California and in Texas more than anywhere else. God has blessed me with the ministry where I get to travel, where I get to meet new people and touch hearts. It builds my faith knowing that, that people are coming to Jesus, that God can, I don't like to talk about myself, I really don't, but he uses me as an instrument. And I've been able to meet people that have said, Deacon, you've changed my life. Deacon, what that permanent deacon from Puerto Rico did for me, I'm able to do to other people. And that makes me want to pray more. That makes me want to be closer to God. That makes me want to do more I hope in this ministry that God has given me that I'm able to start something else bigger. A foundation of I don't know what, but that has to come from God. Something is building there, but I don't know what it is. But my faith has definitely grown. I give a lot of youth talks. I do a lot of talks in English, and I get to confirmation retreats, youth retreats. I get to meet a lot of kids that are saying that they've been through the same things that they were going through. Les falta de amor, not having the love that they wanted from their parents, or being adopted, being abandoned, drugs, alcohol, and just hearing these kids saying, I want to change, and then be able to go back. And I've been invited to several places to go back many times, in which this is the real true blessing, is that you get to see those people, you see the people and you see the kids that have changed. I met a young gentleman, his name is Ivan, in a conference, a congreso in Kansas City, Missouri. And we talk back and forth. He's now I'm the godfather to his son. Before they couldn't even have a baby or anything like that. And just to see their faith grow, it's like, wow, and I don't ever think that I did that, no, because I don't do nothing. He's the one that does it. But to see God do such great things, when you turn your heart over to God, he wants us to be smart, to be intellectual. But what he wants is this right here. What he wants is our heart. To see people changing their hearts and getting closer to God and wanting to pray more and wanting to do more and to understand and to read his word. And that just makes me want to do more. It's tiring work though, don't get me wrong, it is. People are like, oh, I want to travel, At first it's like, okay, cool, I get to travel. And now it's like, oh man, I get to travel, yay. But it is work, you're waiting in an airport for 6 hours for your next flight. you're waiting to see you to make sure you can get your next flight. You're stressed out. So my respects to any other misioneros that are out there that travel and do this on a constant basis, because it is work, but it's work that we really love to do. And it has really helped me grow in my faith, grow and see the examples of other people, so that way I can take also and learn from other people also. Because my process, I believe to the day that I die, I can learn something from somebody else. I don't like that. That's the way I am and that's the way I want to be. I believe that God gave us a capacity, as long as we're mentally healthy and we're mentally capable of it, to continue to change and continually to get closer to Him, to continually to pray, continually to help and to serve others.